Oh, turn this around. There we go. Good morning. Good morning. Get kicked off here in just a few minutes. Got to get some of my screens situated. Little surprise here. I'm also on YouTube streaming live, and you may also be able to catch it on Insta right now. But yeah, so while we're here waiting for kind of some folks to get in and populated, let's go ahead and what I would encourage you to do is share the link. Share the link with your friends. Let them know what you're doing. Let them know. Host a listening or a watching party. Let folks know about this, right? Having this conversation in a vacuum is not helpful for anyone. Look at y'all over here. Let me adjust this. Make sure that this one gets kicked on there. Hello. Hello. There we go. If you're wondering about the music is provided by Kynamo. If you don't know about it, check it out. Kynamo. Kynamo. Alrighty. So let my team know I'm in the our production dock, and here we go. Get a sip of coffee first. Coffee today is from Rwanda, evidently. So one more minute. Again, share the link that you're watching. Host a watch party. Let folks know that the conversation's happening. Good morning. Hello. How are you all doing today? Thank you for joining us. Coffee with the Black Guy. We're here to have conversations, and I don't want to waste too much time because we got a lot of stuff to get into. Had quite a few questions come in, had some very good questions come in, and also kind of grouped some questions around some of the issues that are currently going on, and themes that people were writing in about. Yeah, we're at an interesting time in our country right now, and it's very taxing, right? It's very taxing to be Black in America every day of the week, but specifically over the past few weeks, it's been particularly difficult. And I know it's been difficult for everyone across the board. There's a lot of folks that are coming into their continuum of racial understanding and beginning their journey. There's some who are frustrated the fact that they've been on this journey for a while, and folks are just joining. But either way, welcome. First, I'm going to just give you a quick little snapshot of what Coffee with the Black Guy is. Coffee with the Black Guy is essentially just community conversations. I've got coffee. We've got an internet connection instead of an in-person connection. You like that? Yep. Mm-hmm. And conversation. It's a little difficult to have a conversation in this format. I'm not able to engage myself. My team is actually fielding the questions as they're coming in on the various platforms. I may or may not be able to get to those because I said we have quite a few that have already popped up here today. But hopefully what today does is gives you some tools. It's your entry point, right? Entry point or continuing point on the conversation about race and discrimination in our country, our great country of America. Right now people have questions. People are angry. People are unsettled. And when I'm talking about people, I'm talking about me. Let's get kicked off with the first question, right? You could have submitted questions via the webpage. There's also a survey on the webpage. Thank you to the folks who filled that stuff out. It's been great to kind of give me an idea of what you all want to talk about and some of the issues and things and themes. I will read the first question. I am a graduate student at UCSB. My department does not have a single Black person and a small number of people of color. I want to push towards having more equity in admissions for my department and a more inclusive environment. But as a white woman, I do not want to overstep my role in this fight. How do I know the best course of action? You know what? I'm not going to answer that question. I'm going to table that because that's actually right underneath of the theme one of the main themes that I saw coming out of that. And I will get to that here in a second. And I will loop back to how to be an advocate when there are no people of color. So making a note here, how to be an advocate. Oh, and also to kind of try to recreate the live experience of asking questions. I really didn't read these questions beforehand. I just kind of put them on this document and just going to go for them as we go. So again, I'll get back to that question. But when you're the only one that more specifically as a white woman we'll address that here in a second. I think this one falls under the same thing too. What can a privileged white senior do to end the violence against people? I appreciate these, and I appreciate your attempt to do that. So thank you for that. And again, boom, boom, put that right under the answer I'm going to come into, which I think is the theme that I'm seeing kind of unfold here. Another question. I am a member of a Jewish women's group in Ventura County. I'm looking for a local women of color organization for us to connect with, donate to, support. I feel it's too easy to come make a one-time donation to a cause and be done. Changing our country is going to take a lot of concerted effort. Yes, you're right. Yes, you're right. So I think what I'll do is I'll just answer all of those three and kind of summarize what I've seen as kind of a theme as some folks have been engaging here. And what I think actually I have it. There was one that I did see, and I like the way it was phrased, and I don't think it was necessarily a question for this topic of discussion, but it is absolutely it. So let me summarize the question with this from someone in Ventura, mid-30s white woman in Ventura. What is the place for white women in this? That seems to be the theme of the questions, right? That seems to be a big, what do we do, right? And so that's first part of the question. What is the place for white women in this? We are the least likely to be a victim of police brutality. I could determine the election, or no, white women could determine the election if they got off their butts and voted. And they're often in control of the household spending and can use our dollars to make statements of support for Black and minority-owned businesses. Okay, so as I mentioned, I think that's kind of the theme of some of the questions. Basically, what do white women do? Where are we at right now? The recommendation I have for white women, for white folks, is quite frankly, be more like Black women, right? Black women show up. 2008, 2012, why did Democrats win the election? Because of Black women. Black women showed up. Joe Biden, his resurgence in the Democratic Party as the front runner, why did that happen? Black women. When they were in South Carolina in the primaries, what were they targeting? Black women, right? So then that's when you hear that, you know that Black women consistently show up, right? And so that's one recommendation. Be more like Black women and consistently show up. To know the answers no one knows the answers. I don't know the answers. These are just suggestions. I don't profess to know everything or anything. But Yeah, I mean, even hitting on the Jewish woman aspect, and I've heard this quite a bit, is that, yes, I understand the persecution of Jews and the Holocaust, and absolutely a horrible tragedy. I absolutely understand that there are Irish in Boston and other places. There's discrimination within the white race, right? The difference that I point out is that of those marginalized groups, none have been documented and in code been property. Somebody's property. Yeah, that's uncomfortable, right? That's very uncomfortable when you think of it like that. In that context, is the fact that, yes, we've all been, we have these different groups of marginalization, but to be thought of as somebody's property. And I can't address the issue of what white women's role is in this without looking at the history of white women's role in slavery. There might be a guy down in Houston, one of my brothers, Gabriel, who's screaming right now if he's watching, because we've had multiple conversations about this. But it's estimated that white women were 40% of the slave owners. 40%, right? When you look at the founding father of our country, George Washington, it said he had, we know the story about the cherry tree and all that stuff, but it's said that he has somewhere in the avenue of 18 slaves. His wife, Martha, 84. Right? And so I think there's a real history of women's role in slavery, white women's role in Jim Crow. I mean, when these lynch mobs would go out and hang, folks that look like me, and brutalize folks that look like me for no other reason, who did those cloaked racists go home and lay next to? That is an uncomfortable conversation. What I got to say about that? If you're sitting right there right now and you're like, James, I don't like this, I feel uncomfortable. That is the area of opportunity, right? That's my thought, at least, right? Right when you're in that area of uncomfortable, take a look, pause, and settle in that a little bit, and then start to think critically. Don't get defensive, but think critically. What is that coming from? Where is that feeling coming from? And a big nod to the therapists throughout my life who poured that knowledge into me. But at the same time, it's real, right? Like there is a real history of white women with slavery. And also, that doesn't even touch on the sexualization of it, right? And so when you're talking about, back to the first question that was asked, when you're the only white woman in a setting and there's no diversity, stand up. Show up, talk about it, right? Like if no one else in your department is talking about it, you be that voice. That is your job. That is your role. Thinking back a couple of years ago, what was that, 2016 or so, when right after Trump won the election or stole the election, I remember there was like this, these marches and women's marches, and that energy was so infectious. And that energy was created by white women. That energy also led somebody to start knitting little pink hats to replicate pussies and putting them on people's heads. So when the question is posed to me, what should white women do? Right now, I question, what did you do then? Right? Who told you? And, it's very difficult. And again, I'm sweeping big brushes here. It's very dangerous and difficult when you're talking about a whole race or try to clump folks like that. But there was this movement of these pussy hats. Who said to do that? Was there a memo that went out and said everybody start doing this? Or was that something that just kind of organically grew out of innovation and, innovation and thought processes and just leaning in and doing it, right? Yeah, I did say lean in, right? We know about that. There's a book called that. Who was that? Cheryl Sandsberg, I think her last name is at Facebook. I think that was her book. Correct me if I'm wrong. Again, I don't profess to know it all. Just here to start a conversation. All righty. So we've got those questions out of the way on white women's roles, or an option for white women's roles. Got some questions coming in. Yeah. So I appreciate that, Henry Ventura, diversity manager, diversity EEOC and manager for the County of Ventura. His question, or excuse me, the County of Santa Barbara. I'm over here slipping. His last name is Ventura, but he works in the County of Santa Barbara. A good friend here. And his question today is, what do you recommend for organizations to create a solid program that is not reactive, but rather embedded into the core values? Well, I appreciate that question, Henry, but right now we're a little too late. We're in the war now. And you know, it is definitely a racial war. We need to beat this thing out and get rid of it from our country once and for all. It is the foundational sin of our country, and it's one that we. If you've watched my speech that's online that I did on what was that Thursday down in Ventura, that was it moved me. I'm sorry I got lost because that was a very backstory on that. When you watch so that entire speech pretty much came to me in the shower the night before. A lot of my best thinking happens in the shower, but I was in the shower and all I remember is just standing there and the water hitting me and thinking, it's time. And that phrase just kept shouting over in my head, it's time. It's time, right? And so when I put that together, and you're talking about what can organizations or companies do proactively, well, don't give up. This energy that we feel right now, the attention that we have on this issue, this real issue that we've been telling y'all about for years, don't give up. You know, stay part of this fight. Specific programs, I mean, again, I just start the conversation. I think this is an entry point into it. There's books to read. You can have reading groups, discussions around those, community discussions around those. I think that, the mayor of Santa Barbara has recommended, in a statement, she recommended that folks read Dr. Ibram X. Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. I agree with that. Read that and talk about it. Don't just read it and hide the cover. Read about it and talk about it. These issues need to be these issues need to be addressed. And that's why I love having a team here, because they are helping remind me that we need to plug the online store. There's a big announcement today. In addition to unpacking some of these issues, and dive right back into the questions. But if you go to CWABG.com, just today we launched our limited edition Solidarity Collection mugs, right? To tribute to Black Lives Matter and this movement of trying to, as I mentioned, stamp out the cancer of racism in society once and forever. And so, yeah, go over to the website, check out, of course, when we're done the conversation, and check out the online store, limited edition Solidarity Collection. Say their name. Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Manuel Ellis. If you haven't heard that one, look that up. Manuel Ellis. Yeah. It's been a tough time in this country. Tough time. Also on the website, if you keep scrolling down a little bit past the online store, there is the link to the Cash App and Venmo. As I mentioned, with Coffee with the Black Guy, this has kind of been a labor of love, but it's a passion of pain. And it's one that I feel is necessary for folks to help start kind of unpacking all of this ish that's going on. And so encouraging, if you support, the effort, if you support these conversations, if you support the research, because somehow I don't really do research. It just somehow ends up in my head, and ridiculous things stick, and sometimes I'm wrong. And so if you want to call me out, put $2 in the Venmo and then call me out. No, I'm just messing with you. But any support really is appreciated, because, as I mentioned, it takes a team to do this, and we do have a full team with me, and I'll hopefully be sure to loop back to that here in a sec. But yes, go over to the website, CWABG.com. Diving back into the questions. How can we push forward eliminating quotas on all police forces? We need to demotivate cops from making arrests. True, I don't disagree with that, and quite frankly, I don't know much about quotas. I just remember, the jokes of like slow down around the last month or the last week of every month, because that's when law enforcement is needing to make sure that they make their quotas. But I've never seen any or heard of anything significant behind that. However, the second part of that question is, how do we? We need to demotivate cops from making arrests. Absolutely. And when you're talking about things with quotas and or making arrests, I mean, I've shared this idea, but like when you think about where we are currently as a nation, and the racial and civil unrest that we're currently seeing, and the tensious behavior between communities of color and law enforcement. Just look at the history, right? The history of policing in the United States, right? The history of policing was prior to about 1830s or so, was pretty much volunteer neighborhood watch, and then as the need to protect businesses and business interests in New England area, Boston specifically. That's when police forces the business owners came and collaborated to be able to make sure that their properties were protected and things. At the same time, there was another movement of proliferation of policing growing in the South under similar circumstances. Those circumstances were, just make sure that the property was kept where it belonged. And when I say property, I mean slaves, right? Making sure that slaves were kept to their slave owners or their overseers, and those were called slave patrols. And so, when we need to demotivate cops from making arrests, I think that we start with stop focusing on policing communities of color. You always see more police officers. When I go to Montecito, I don't really see Montecito, California. That's Oprah, Ellen, those folks, right? I don't see law enforcement sitting on the corner in their car, writing on pads or doing things like that. But right outside of my house on the west side, they do, right? So it's about where and kind of what is the focus of what, criminalizing behavior, right? We see that happening now. When you have riots, how do they get control of these things? They put in a curfew and then criminalize you being outside, and then they can engage you and make arrests. So what you're telling me, James, is that if they did not put in a curfew, they wouldn't have been able to arrest that many people. Yeah, that's right. They wouldn't have been able, because they did not have any laws to keep them. They did not have any laws to back up that arrest. Very similar to a lot of the antagonistic behavior that happens in our communities on a regular basis. But just kind of pointing that out as some context for that. And I don't know if it's an idea of eliminating quotas, but I definitely think we need to take a deeper look at police unions. Police unions are a challenge, and I'll more than likely get into that a bit more. Quick time check, because going quick, folks, going quick. So yeah, there's that. So Patty, thank you for that question. And Amber asked a question, should we travel to local cities to attend protests? Well, I would note that, we're still in the midst of a pandemic. And I think that is lost in the conversation when, safety and living is the primary concern. But I would not encourage going to other cities to attend protests per se. Um, and quite frankly, I'm not the biggest fan of protests, although the ones the past week have been very invigorating for me. I see protest as being for the people who go to them, right? Like that was invigorating for me. That fed me to keep doing the work, the other work that you don't see outside of the public eye. And so, like for me, that's it's that collective aspect of it that's beneficial for me. But then there's also I have this platform, and I have other ways to plug in and be useful during this time. And so, if if that's what it takes for you to feel useful to this movement, I don't want to discourage that at all. But at the same time, just be mindful. We're still in the midst of a pandemic, and right now we're just getting hit with the surge from everybody kind of being sick of it already by Memorial Day, and so I only think that we're going to continue to see that. But thank you for that, because that's that was I needed to remind myself that we're in the midst of a global pandemic, COVID-19. All righty, let's keep it moving here. Emily, what are the best actions companies can take in this time and moving forward? So before all of this happened, like I said, I started Coffee with the Black Guy 4 years ago, and the vision that I had was that companies would be able to sit down and have a facilitated conversation. If it's not me, if you've got somebody in-house, what have you, but somebody who can provide that context. And a lot of times it's best to have a third party come in as a neutral party instead of somebody who you have to continually work with. So I can be the bad guy instead of your coworker. But I think having these conversations, like we in the work, in the HR area and in the work setting, we try to avoid confrontation, avoid offending anybody, avoid any potential lawsuits or things of that nature. But I wholeheartedly believe that if we do it in a way that is respectful, right? That if we do it in a way that it's respectful and specifically create space just for that, whereas it's not happening when two coworkers are walking past each other in the hallway and taking away from time, but say, hey, we're going to have an extended lunch hour today. So instead of lunch being a half an hour, we're going to make that 2 hours. And on the back end, what I'd like to do is we're going to have table captains, and I'm just making this up on the fly. We're going to have table captains get with go sit at a table. We'll have table captains start a facilitated conversation at your table, and then we'll go back to work. And just start that conversation, right? And then when you go home, you'll be like, hey, honey, how was work today? You'll be like, oh, well, today at work, we had this conversation. And that kind of leads into more conversations. And, again, back on that speech I gave on Thursday, like if the conversation isn't happening, we're doomed from there on in, because there's some of y'all that are watching right now who've known about Coffee with a Black Guy for a while. You've known what I've done. You've known these kind of conversations, and you have not engaged. And I'm not trying to make you feel uncomfortable or bad per se on that. But what I'm saying is really look at that and allow that to be a teachable moment for yourself. What is it that got you excited and involved in this really real reality for me now? Right? What is it that pulled you in and said, enough is enough? Because, what did it for me was Trayvon Martin, and that was 2012. So what is it that led you to this awakening? And talk about that, right? Talk about that. I think it's also safe to have ground rules for the conversations as well as an exit point, right? And so say that we're going to have this conversation and it'll cut off at this time, and have the ground rules. I think that allows folks to really, have the space to do it. But at the same time, like there's intention to that. So thank you for that question. And yeah, there's more things too. Like I had mentioned earlier, reading clubs, reading groups, book clubs. I like to go paintballing, right? So, I went the other day when we were at the rally, and I tend to be more of an olive branch negotiator than an antagonist. However, when I was at the rally last Sunday here in Santa Barbara, and I saw the officers lined up with their riot gear, and there was one officer that I was particularly peeping because he was holding a Tipman paint gun marker or paintball marker. I was just checking it out because I paintball, and so what that introduced in my mind is, well, okay, so they have this. Why can't we just do a community against law enforcement paintball day? I mean, the shack is right up there in Orchid, the paintball field. So why can't we just say, hey, on this day, Santa Barbara Police Department is putting together, a group of 5 to 7 guys, and because they're trained on a regular basis, they would be against 12 community members. And battle it out on a paintball field. And you know what happens at the end of a game of paintball? Everybody is talking. That's one of the most familial times I've ever seen here in Santa Barbara County, whereas kids come up, man, you almost got me, da da da. And it's a real bonding because you're experiencing something together. We need to have more opportunities like that with members of our community who enforce the law. Again, right? Members of our community. So one of the prerequisites to being a law enforcement officer, in my mind, should be that you got to live in the community that you police. However uncomfortable that may be, it creates a different level of accountability and a different connection to the people whom you're policing. And so I know that that's not always possible in every location, given the geographic diversity of this great nation. But that's just one thought of a way to think differently about how we engage in our society. Because if we continue to engage the way that we've been engaging, it's only going to lead to more of what we currently have. And so new and innovative ideas have to be a part of that. So if Ivinsky, if you're out there, that's your task. That's essentially, he's the paintball general in the area. Okay, boom, that's enough on paintball. Quick plug for the sponsors. So again, being that this is online, a lot of folks have reached out, a lot of companies have reached out, and I appreciate you all for that. But there's a few folks that I definitely want to highlight first and foremost. One being my boss, Senator Hannah Beth Jackson. I'm her district director and have worked for her for the past 8 years. And as somebody who has stood up for the rights of women and fought in that area, I was always on the back end pushing. Yeah, but what about us? Yeah, but what about us? And she was very clear that women fighting for equal pay for women was a start, right? That's where companies start. That gets them to look in, take an audit, and realize where they're off. From there, once they see the pay inequity between women and men, then they're looking to other groups as well. And so that's the thought process. And working for a woman that's so strategic and thoughtful and powerful on the mic, I think I picked up a few things. And so I appreciate her for allowing me to continue these conversations, and in fact also pushing folks this way because these conversations desperately need to be happening in our community and on a regular basis. And kudos to those of you who have been doing that. So one supporter and sponsor, thank you so much, Hannah Beth, or as we affectionately know, HBJ. Also, LinkedIn Black Inclusion Group. My boy Terrence Dixon over at the Carpinteria campus has been just a huge supporter. We've been friends for about, since I've been in California. It's about a little bit more than 10 years now. But his development and his energy in that company has been awesome to watch. And the fact that he is now leading a part of the global Black Inclusion Group for LinkedIn, it is a salute. And I just wanted to make sure that we salute you, my brother, and also make sure folks know that you're doing good stuff. Another person, Nick Dugan. Nick Dugan works at Appfolio, and I sit on a diversity committee that Henry Ventura, with the county of Santa Barbara, is convening. And Nick reached out and offered a nice sponsorship and support of the work that we're doing, and look forward to continuing these conversations here and in our diversity and inclusion roundtable. Another one, Visionality Partners out of Ventura. Emily Barony, a big support and is stepping up in a big way. Always has stepped up for our community, but not necessarily in social justice area. She's been great in the disaster area, but to see Emily with Visionality Partners step up and come out with a strong statement in support of this movement and a focus both financially and in her work to this movement has been it's heartwarming. And that, like, when you say, what can white women do? Like, Emily's a white woman. Pay attention to what Emily has done. Pay attention to what Hannah Beth has done. Like, those are examples of ways to engage and get this. And so also got to give a shout out to Beware of the Humans. Beware of the Humans out here with the gear. My boy Joe, he's had this brand for several years, and I really encourage you all to go look that up. Beware of the Humans. I'm looking to have some collaborative projects with him soon. But the name says it all. Beware of the Humans. So I appreciate you. And let me see, 4 more folks. Jeremy Meyer in Ventura County, I appreciate you. Liz Haley, I appreciate you. The Ventura County Community Foundation, I appreciate you. And last but certainly not least, Regina Crawford of the Ventura County NAACP chapter, and legacy of John R. Hatcher III, who's I wouldn't say waste some time, but spent some time on me and mentored. But if you don't know about John R. Hatcher III, definitely check that brother out. May he rest in peace. But a big thanks to Regina and the Ventura County chapter of the NAACP. Refilling here real quickly before we dive right back into some more questions. You all go ahead and do that too if you need to go ahead and refill, because I sure as heck hope that you're not just sitting at home watching without drinking coffee, and because that would just be sacrilegious. It's coffee with a black guy, so it doesn't really count unless you have coffee or tea. You can have tea too. All right. Let's see. Oh, we'll get to the follow-up activities. Oh, so as I'm leading into this next question, I want to, and I'm a big fan of teachable moments. And so there were several folks who reached out to me over the past couple of days about how do I log into this conversation? How do I watch? How do I, I don't know. And that's understandable. On the LinkedIn Live platform, again, thank you to LinkedIn. I've been approved as an approved broadcaster on their beta live platform. And so there is a lot of uncertainty. I don't know how the platform fully works, but I'll be doing some research or doing some after action to find out how we can fine tune this for future conversations. But knowing the challenges that there were with that, and knowing, like, how do I get on? Just think about that as a teachable moment. Just think about the uncertainty that you had for that. And that's just an example, right? Now imagine if that uncertainty or finding a way to watch this was a literacy test or a poll test in order to be able to vote, right? Those are things that were put into place. Those were barriers that were put into place. I do not mean for this to be a barrier. I'm just saying that being the challenges that technology gave us, we can use that as a teachable moment on how do we pursue our goals after the barrier is put in our place, right? And so, that's something that I point to as a resilient skill of my people, by and large. But utilize that as kind of a reflective moment of, okay, so yeah, I'm gonna have to be dogged about this work, right? Folks would be willing to subject themselves to death, being beaten and tortured, to be able to go take a literary test, then to be able to vote. So for those of you all out here who question the ability to vote and all of that stuff, I just challenge you to do one thing. There's a document called We Charge Genocide that was, and it's on the reading list that's on the webpage, but it's called, the official full title, We Charge Genocide, the historical petition to the United Nations for relief from a crime of the United States government against the Negro people. This historic petition was compiled by the Civil Rights Congress in 1951. I'm just going to thumb through here and just something I highlighted. Harry Haywood and Earl Conrad in an unpublished paper on atrocities against 15 million Negro citizens. It was a book. Atrocities against 15 million Negro citizens. I haven't read it, but hey. Okay. So here's an example of something. If you don't want to take this voting thing seriously, just think about this. November 11th, 1945. November, it's election month. Some Atlanta police are reported to be beating up discharged and disabled Negro veterans at the slightest provocation and practicing a general get them in line with the post-war attitude. Like, these are documented real things that are in this document, right? And so in there and among that is also, several cases of U.S. veterans who put their blood, sweat, and tears on the line for this country, then come back from fighting abroad and treated like dogs. Treated worse than dogs, right? Because right now in our country, dogs have a lot of people looking out for them. Always have. I mean, just look at how swift and severe the punishment on Michael Vick was, right? And then look at where we are and how long it took and what it took in order for folks to give a damn about us. How am I supposed to feel about that, right? Not good. But not to harp on the past, we got to move forward. Yeah. So there's that. And so, I mean, hopefully you were able to get the link and be able to watch. But just imagine, had I not responded to that, and then you just had to figure it out on your own. That's the history of America that we're overcoming, is that was the reality not that long ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. 50 to 60 years ago, that was the reality. Okay, we're rolling around on about 15 minutes, and so let's try to get through a couple more of these questions. How do we protest with our vote, and do you endorse or who do I endorse in our local and state elections? I don't really endorse in elections, largely because I work for an elected official, and that's frowned upon. I mean, if she endorses somebody and I support him, I'll go work with that campaign. But I'm not really in the business of endorsing. About voting, what I will tell you, particularly about this time, this November that we're coming up, and understanding the importance of this election per se. In the context of COVID-19 and the conversations, particularly here in California, and there's other states that are moving towards vote by mail. I've been a vote by mail for years, and I think that's that's my more comfortable way of voting. I take a look at the ballots at home, have some music on, have a beer, and fill out my ballot. I mean, what's wrong with that? Nothing. So, in an extension of, all right, so we're heading into November. A lot of voting is not going to be at the polls. An idea I think that would be awesome is ballot parties, right? I used to work for a guy by the name of Das Williams, who's currently the supervisor here in Santa Barbara, Santa Barbara County, and he's actually my supervisor. And when I worked for him, I started working on his campaign, and as part of his campaign, he employed the Dolores Huerta model of organizing, where you have house meetings and really building around existing networks and connections to engage larger populations, right? And so under that mindset, why don't we have ballot parties on Zoom, Facebook, FaceTime, all of these different platforms, Skype. When you're getting together for grandma's birthday and celebrating and blowing out the candles, set aside 15 minutes, everybody pull out your ballots. They may be different, but there's going to be some common issues on those ballots. You talk through those issues, fill them out, and then at the end of the day, at least in California, you can ballot harvest. And so what that means is one person on the call can say, all right, everybody stick your ballots in this location. We're going to come around and pick them up, or we're coming around to pick up ballots on this day and this time after you fill them out. There's a lot of possibilities and a lot of ways to be innovative during this time. We've figured out ways to do so many things, and I want to make sure that we are able to rock the boat. Yeah. Rock the boat. So there's that question. Enough. I falsely believe voting for ethnically diverse and progressive candidates would help. It has not. What is the most impactful thing we can do? Look at a candidate for his or her record and not necessarily their party affiliation. Um, um, there's a lot of folks that are very feel disengaged by the two-party system. You can just look at what happened in, what was that, 2016 with the whole Hillary-Bernie split and kind of how that is still taking, infecting the party today. And there's, yeah, I can say more on this later, but I would definitely say just look at the candidates, engage the candidates. I mean, I've worked a few campaigns, and the candidates are looking, at least during the campaigns, they are looking to engage you as a voter and potential constituent. And so in that mindset, I think I encourage you to engage your elected officials, and all politics is local, right? And so, yeah, vote. Make sure that you hear what their platform is for them to get your vote. But that's just the start of it, right? Like once you vote, then you have to remain engaged. If you work and can't watch or attend all the council meetings or what have you, find a way to stay plugged in. Find a way to continue to engage your elected officials. Again, I've worked in state politics for the past 10 years, and it's very rarely do I hear about issues that concern race, right? Very rarely do I hear folks outreach and engage and come to an opinion of support or oppose on issues of race. Yeah, I mean, we heard about the use of force laws and different things that were pending in the legislature, but I've told this to the community advocacy coalition down in Ventura County. Like, we don't hear from you all. Like, you should be tracking the bills that are going to positively and negatively affect Black folks, and make sure that you are engaging your elected official on these issues. Well, I don't know what bills to look at. Well, guess what? There's an organization called the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, that does that. And they have a presence in Sacramento and lobbyists, and they engage the Legislative Black Caucus. And so they're paying attention to various bills and legislation that's going out that's going to affect and impact us and our lives, our communities, that kind of stuff. And so don't just vote. Let that be the start and keep it on moving. Next question. Teresa, mid-40s, white woman. I am shocked by how disrespectful and violent people can be towards any human being. I have a hard time understanding the hatred. Obviously, I'm very uneducated and like to learn more about the subject. It is very painful to deal with the reality of what has been going on for centuries now. It is shocking, but I have faith for a better, more respectful world. Well, no, I hear you, and I don't want this next comment to come across as being aggressive or antagonistic, but there's a movement or an idea that has been that's being talked about right now among Black folks, and it's the whole idea of white tears, right? If any of you have tapped into Black Twitter at all, this whole conversation of white tears, there's folks that are I mix white tears with Hennessy and drink it because that's how some folks feel, but it's that it kind of gets at that notion of the fragility of, yes, it sucks. It is horrible what's been happening and continuing and has been happening. But this newfound incredulousness about our condition it's laughable to me. I mean, we've been telling y'all this is our reality. And it's unfortunate that you're just coming to, and I want y'all to keep fighting and stay in the fight. But just know that it's not always going to be, roses and good stuff, right? There's going to be times where there's going to be some challenges, some tough spots, and the analogy I like to use is that all we need to do is just look no further than nature to pay attention to what it is that we should pay attention to, right? If you're feeling uneasy and uncomfortable, well, so does the seed of a flower before it becomes a flower. It's uncomfortable to be a seed and be in the soil and have to frictionlessly crack through that seed and the soil to become a flower, right? We've got to get through some rough and frictionless times in order to get to a more happy place where we're supposed to be. Not saying that everything needs to be happy, happy, joy, joy. However, where we currently are, there is much room for improvement. So yeah, thank you for that question. And that's just my thoughts on that. Let's see here. Thank you, Patricia, for this question. Does this moment feel different? Do you feel the momentum for change is real? Hell yes. Hell yes. I just, looking no further than myself and how I feel connected to the other energies around me and who's paying attention to the conversations and who's engaging in the conversations and the outfall from those conversations. This does feel different. It is extremely different. And I hope it is different because in the past, all that's happened is after the moment, there's no movement, right? So I think the challenge in that statement is to make sure that that this movement is more than a moment, right? That we push forward and really push to make things better. I mean, we are better than this, like particularly about where we are right now. Like we're better than this. We're smarter than this. We're more moral than this. We just need to be reminded of that, and we need to lean into that and really. Here I go with these damn memes, but here we really need to be the change that we want to see. Thanks, Obama. Appreciate you. Alrighty, wrapping up here. We got about another 5 minutes or so. If my team on the background, if you can put a note in our little communication area, kind of how many or kind of the flow of questions that have been coming in real time, because that may determine if I decide to keep the party going. But I very well may need to just get something to eat or a smoothie with my Iris sea moss gel from Crown Moss. That's my cousin. That's why I just have to put that in there. She's been selling Crown Moss sea moss gel, and it's been awesome to put in my smoothie. So check that out. Support her. Back to the question. Thank you so much for hosting this. I am white. I don't have many Black friends or friends who are people of color in general. I grew up in an area with small populations of Black people, and I didn't do a good job in university of making friends with Black people or really any people of color. My university and the place I grew up did a lot of self-segregating. The place I live now also doesn't have a lot of Black people and tends to be segregated. Being conscious of not invading Black spaces, how do I start with my own life to change that for myself and my community? Yeah, that's a tough balance about being respectful of not invading Black spaces and intentionally going into places that are predominantly Black. An example, a step show. It's probably not a place that you're gonna, if you're a white person, that you're gonna feel comfortable, because there's a lot of Black folks, and we are culturally awesome at those things because that is part of the rhythm and the beat of our soul. So that's the kind of thing where, just show up, be at that, learn, engage, learn the culture. If it's a conversation that the Santa Barbara Young Black Professionals is hosting about, how do we maintain mental health during this time of COVID-19? No, you don't invade that Black space, right? So just be mindful, be thoughtful, yeah, that's a general thing. Be thoughtful, yeah. So as we're rounding the last 5 minutes here, I do want to make sure that, being that this is just kind of a taste of what a Coffee with the Black Guy experience can be, we definitely, I definitely enjoy the in-person conversations more, but we understand the reality of what that is. But I want to make sure that you're aware of next Wednesday, I've been invited and honored to have a conversation with my friend Mark Sylvester on the TEDx platform. And so evidently my team has put it up on a webpage now, TEDx-CWABG.com. Man. And like and subscribe on the YouTube, follow us on Facebook, IG, and Twitter. That is kind of helping with the movement. Like, that is helping with the movement. Buy mugs, take pictures with the mugs, hashtag CWABG, hashtag all these things, and let folks know. Make this an infectious thing to have these conversations. Make it cool to be uncomfortable, because that is the only thing that's going to get us from where we are to where we need to be and where we deserve to be. And so let's make sure that that's part of our lives moving forward. Let's make sure that empathy for your fellow human is part of what we do and is part of what the American experience is. And in the final wrap up here, as I mentioned and alluded to several times, like, yes, somehow my face has become what is known as Coffee with the Black Guy. And reluctantly, I am that, but happy to be able to share these things. But I could not do it without my team. And from the beginning, I've had a team behind me with this. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Jarrett Brown. Jarrett Brown is down in Orlando from the Baltimore area, but he's down in the Orlando area and is the director or excuse me, not the director. He is the chief operations officer. I have my good friend Ernest Smith, better known as EJ to those of us who grew up with him. Ernest was in San Antonio, Texas, but is now in Columbia, Maryland, and he is the chief business operations officer. And then we have our director of marketing and e-commerce, Miss Kai Meyer out of Houston, who's been on the ground with George Floyd's family, Kai Meyer and Collective Media, Narciso. I appreciate y'all. Everybody who I just mentioned has been absolutely instrumental in getting this movement where it is today. And in my heartfelt thank you to y'all. And if y'all feel that, go ahead and hit up that Cash App and Venmo so we can go ahead and take care of them for putting all this effort and time in to making sure that we can engage in these kind of conversations, because it's very, very important. Some would say it's life and death. So as I'm wrapping up here, I want to make sure that you're aware of some after action things. Keep an eye out for some virtual town hall that will be coming up with the NAACP. We'll be hosting this and talking about issues of implicit bias, use of force, and complaint processes. Big thanks to Visionality Partners for partnering with the NAACP in Ventura County to help facilitate that. And also, like I said, make sure that you go check out the information. I'll be on the TEDx platform having a conversation about unpacking where we currently are today in a lot of this stuff. As always, appreciate your engagement, appreciate you. Welcome to these conversations. Welcome to being uncomfortable. Welcome to our path to a better MFing community. And I did try to keep my cursing to a minimal today, because I hope that a lot of folks have reached out that they're having challenges having these conversations with their kids. And so I will hope that some of these conversations that you'll also be able to go back on the YouTube channel and look at will be available to you to go back and look, digest, talk to your kids and your family members about these things. As always, lots of love. I appreciate you all. I appreciate that you appreciate me. And in the spirits of keeping our ancestors right, I appreciate them for pouring into me. Ashe. But as we end out here, I think I might just put on some music, because that's how we... Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. I appreciate y'all. Again, check out the webpage, CWABG.com. Hopefully we'll have some more stuff like this coming for you soon.